Lessons from the Real World webinar. I'm Jesse Berst. I'm your host today, and we're going to talk for the next hour about how to put yourself on the path to strategic or advanced asset management. I just returned from the Metering America conference in San Diego last week, where I was on a panel with representatives from San Diego Gas and Electric, from CenterPoint Energy, and from PECO. Those are the three of the utilities in the U.S. that are furthest along in smart metering and smart grid. And it was very striking that all three are moving aggressively into this asset management space. And the reason is it's where the money is. That's where some big benefits are. And so we're going to try to help you get you on that path to those benefits like reliability, like predictive maintenance, like prevention of catastrophic failure, maybe even better relationships with your regulators, as we'll explain a little bit later. So here's the team that's going to be joining you today. I'm Jesse Berst. I'm with SmartGridNews.com, the Internet's oldest and largest and highest-ranked smart grid site. Also joining us is an industry veteran and a president of a leading consultancy, Bob Moisan. Bob, thanks for helping out today.
You're welcome.
And I'll introduce all of the presenters in a little more detail when it's their turn to talk. But I wanted you to know that also with us today is Marc-Andre, who's the Chief Technology Officer at Utilicase, which is really one of the thought leaders in this space. Welcome, Marc-Andre.
Thank you, GC, for the invitation.
And finally, Thomas Ta is here from BC Hydro, and he's going to present some of the real-world experiences that they've had as they march down this path. So, Thomas, thanks for taking time to share today.
Thank you, Jesse.
So let's get started. Here's what we're going to cover. Bob Moisan is going to give us an introduction about why and how asset management is changing in some pretty dramatic ways, the objectives of strategic asset management, and some of the benefits you can expect. Marc-Andre is going to help us get on the path and explain the steps to get these benefits. He'll talk about the return on investment, the 6 success steps that they've identified with working with their clients, and some of the things you can hope to learn about your assets via strategic asset management. And then we're going to turn for the balance of the time to BC Hydro, find out what their objectives and their approach was, some of the real-world challenges that they faced and overcome, and you'll actually get to see some screen captures and see how BC Hydro is actually doing this today. So with that, let me bring up Bob Moisan. He's a friend of mine, an industry veteran, got more than 35 years of experience and across a wide range of utility topics and areas. So it makes him really, I think, ideally suited to introduce us to strategic asset management and explain its benefits. Bob, thanks for joining us, and over to you.
Thanks, Jesse. Appreciate that. My purpose today is to basically introduce strategic asset management. We're going to focus principally on T&D assets in this discussion. I think as you look back historically in this area, back when life was probably a lot simpler than it is today, our asset focus was primarily on iron and wires. We had the luxury of equipment that seemed to last longer than the depreciation schedules as well as design lives. Equipments were heavy-duty designs. We had the luxury of systems with a certain amount of overcapacity that created some flexibility in operations. Maintenance, we tended to be periodic. We would run to failure, although of course we're moving towards more condition-based maintenance and so on. From an operations point of view, having that additional margin made life easier, of course, and gave us flexibility and operating options when stuff started to hit the fan. So what's changing? What about our lives is going to keep us awake for more hours than we probably want to? Obviously, everybody is talking about aging infrastructure. That, of course, if we don't deal with it, will adversely impact service reliability. It's compounded, of course, as we look at equipment with very long lead times, particularly power transformers. And, of course, as people are trying to get more affordable equipment designs, we're seeing those designs tighter to the margin. From a regulatory perspective, in many states, of course, we're now seeing reliability performance directly connected to rate making, but at least at a minimum, we're seeing that being focused on by many of the PUCs, for sure. I think life's going to get interesting as we bring smart grid assets to the fore. These assets will tend to have both physical and depreciation lives that are shorter than what we've seen for traditional 30, 40-year lives. our ability to forecast both demand and equipment performance. That uncertainty factor, I'm not sure if it's growing, but it's certainly significant. That'll complicate all our risk management mitigation options that we're trying to put to play. And just to make life more exciting, we have some game changers coming, ranging from photovoltaics on the roof, the EV charging, and of course demand response, particularly as it moves beyond commercial industrial and heads off into the mass market space. So what do we need? Well, we need to be smarter. That's the word of the day, of course. But from an asset investment strategy point of view, you look at some of the forecasts, we're thinking in terms of over $2 trillion of investment in this industry, only exceeded by the federal government's expenditures. Well, we better do this well. We can't afford not to. And that means optimizing both CapEx and OpEx budgets. We would need to look at total ownership costs, not simply first costs, but what's going to happen over the life of the equipment, how we operate it, how we plan it, maintain it, and so on. Operations metrics for optimized maintenance be very critical. Not only do we need to monitor the health and status, we also need to monitor how we operate this equipment. Uncommanded trips on breakers certainly is something to pay particular attention to if that's the asset at hand. And of course, particularly at the bulk power system level, service continuity will continue to be critical, and we need on an ongoing basis to have fewer unexpected equipment failures, particularly some of the consequences of outages. I think the estimate of the 2003 blackout was something north of $80 billion, and with those kind of consequences, we've got to be in front of these things, not behind them. Strategic asset management would characterize by several things. Data acquisition, a lot more data, a lot more sources, monitoring, tests, inspection, not simply keeping track of nameplate and an XY coordinate for where it's located, but a real comprehensive set of data coming from many sources. And the challenge will be to integrate as well as manage this data to productive purposes, such as analysis. We're going to see increased amount of distributed analytics, meaning analytics out in the substation environments where machine-to-machine talk allows real-time operations, real-time decision-making, not necessarily involving operators. Of course, we'll continue to see the growth of offline analytics, both data management platforms, and a whole raft of advanced applications that are coming down the pike. We'll need to focus on predictive capabilities, and we need to, as we are online in real time, trigger alarms and actions as these assets are being monitored and operated according to conditions at hand. We need to have the ability in asset management to act and act quickly. Efficiency means automation in many cases. From a planning perspective, as with any plan, when you meet the enemy, you better be ready for plan B, C, and D. That'll be the case here as things evolve in the field. This picture I'm not going to spend much time on today other than to suggest it's a way to view data, its acquisitions, its use, as we've evolved from more traditional to more strategic asset management approaches. So the net benefit, why do we want to do this? We need to have the ability to have comprehensive management of information, not simply collect a bunch of data. We need to have this interpreted as full, useful, viable information. I think from a structural and institutional point of view, we're going to start bridging some of the data and organizational silos that typify many organizations, and that's something we need to continue to improve on. Flexibility is important, adaptability. As I said before, we've got huge investments in front of us, and their optimization is absolutely critical for the industry as well as for society in general. We can't not do a good job on that. And with any asset plan where you're talking large capital budgets, many hundreds of millions of dollars for utilities in the country, you've got to produce visible, defendable plans so that you've got a chance of getting not only your executive approvals, but in those cases where you have to seek regulatory approvals, you need to be ready with the right information in the right form and so on. Ultimately, we're here to fulfill our service obligations for both the customers of this industry as well as society in general.
Thanks, Bob. That was helpful. Vivek asks if you could help us understand the difference between strategic asset management and more tactical asset management. What's the difference in your view?
Well, I think it's primarily what problem you're trying to solve. In tactical things, you're trying to track, monitor, and be aware of things. Strategic, we're going to be looking increasingly towards optimized decisions. How do we pick the right equipments? Do we refurbish? Do we maintain? Do we replace? Those kind of things where we are trying to make decisions in advance of equipment failures, if you will.
Yeah, and it also seems to me that in this form of asset management, we're looking at a bigger, broader picture than just one particular piece of equipment that we're monitoring, but beginning to prioritize the different pieces of equipment and their criticality. This is a good one for you, another one, Bob, because a lot of your career you've been a change agent in utilities. And Andre asks, how do you socialize the change from run to failure mode to condition or reliability-centered maintenance?
Good question. I mean, as we talk about change, socializing change, those kinds of things, we're not simply talking about re-engineering the processes, but we're talking about resetting the culture in many cases. And as I look at some of the organizational change by design concepts, first and foremost, I think you need to have a shared vision at the top of the organization, which in effect sets the direction, but also gives permission to the organization to change. And then you got to go deep into the organization, looking for those change agents, if you will, to step up and work the problems from the bottom up.
I think I'll ask Thomas Ta of BC Hydro to chime in too. Just real quickly, Thomas, were the social aspects or the business process and organizational aspects part of the challenge at BC Hydro, and how did you overcome them?
Well, it certainly is it's a challenge when we start moving from run to failure to more of the condition-based way of managing the asset. But I think the key part of it is how are you able to manage the whole system and the system as a whole, and able to look at the future cost. Look at the run to failure is a very limited life in terms of how far that we can forecast in the future, and able to managing the holistic view. So based on those, the regulator always wants us to push more looking forward in the future, and run to failure is a very limited mode for us to be able to forecast that type of information.
Okay, terrific. Thank you, Bob and Thomas, for those questions.